When I say the word airflow, is it one word, two words? It's a compound word at least. Airflow. Anyway, we'll stick with one word. What do you think of in the context of tech? I think of PC cases. In fact, we've more or less been groomed over the past few years to look for very airflow-oriented chassis for PC builds. But there's a bit of a tug of war going on behind the scenes. See, the trend of high airflow cases has ultimately destroyed any notion of a silent case, and usually a high airflow case is not silent because by design it has to be more or less open to atmosphere. And when that happens under any sustained load, your fans ramp up inevitably and the system is noticeably louder than would be the case if the chassis was designed around a silent factor. But then if you make a case too silent, as in too closed off to atmosphere, your system's going to run even hotter than it normally would anyway. So you see there's a tad bit of a contradiction there, and a few case manufacturers have tried to tackle both sides of this equation. How do you make a high airflow case that at the same time is kind of sort of quiet? Well, that's where the P10 FLUX and the FLUX family of cases from Antec come into play. We've partnered with them in this video to build in a case like this and talk about some of the advantages it has over the competition. I think you'll enjoy this one. Are you ready? Stay with me.
NZXT has rolled out their new function mechanical keyboards in varying sizes and with plenty of customizability via their BLD service. Choose between 5 different Gatoron switches, 3 chassis colorways, 2 color keycaps, and multiple accent caps and cables for a truly unique custom mechanical experience. Enjoy RGB lighting, key remapping, and multiple sizes as well, from full size to mini TKL, like this one here. It's my favorite. It packs a lot of punch in such a tiny package with media keys, volume roller, and durable aluminum top plate to round out the industrial feel. To start customizing your NZXT function mechanical keyboard, be sure to click the link below.
Switching to handheld mode for just a second, I'm going to walk around the case, show you some of its features before we get started here. You'll see the unobstructed airflow path in the front. You can remove this front dust filter and see these 3 included 120mm intake fans. Behind that is a wire mesh so you can mount a 360mm AIO if you want. You get a 4th fan at the rear. This one's set to exhaust. Now there's no mounting up top. They wanted airflow streamlined from front to back, but also from right to middle. From the right side to the middle. I don't know if that came out the way I want it to, but anyway, this is a case that has a few extra airflow paths that I think you will find very interesting. So this here is the 5th fan you will get with the P10 FLUX. That's right, you get 5 fans included with this case, but this 5th one is designed a bit differently and it mounts on top of the power supply basement. This is it here out of the box, and you notice it looks slightly different than the average fan. That's because the fan blades are actually flipped around to pull air in, so you don't have to stare at an ugly frame if you flip it conventionally to have it, pull in from the bottom. So they designed it this way so that you can mount it on top of the basement so that it looks like this, and it will actually pull in air from the basement itself. But you're thinking, okay, well, where's air coming from in the basement? If I've got a hard drive down there and a power supply, what on earth am I going to get air from? Well, the answer to that, my friends, is right here. There is a mesh area on the bottom side of this right panel, and it's here solely for the purpose of pulling in air from the basement into whatever graphics card you have slotted into your motherboard. Antec says this should considerably lower graphics card temps because now we have an extra fan working to keep that card cool. And on the subject of cool, check this out. So of course the door swings open from left to right? If you have your case on the right side of your desk, this is probably optimal because you can access your optical drive or your front fans or what have you very quickly. However, in the P10 FLUX, you can actually switch this around so that it's hinged on the left side and you can open the door up like so. That would be pretty cool if you have like this case, say, positioned on the left side of your desk. Maybe you're right-handed and you want tons of real estate for your mouse. My wife is that way. She plays CSGO and she's like using half her desk to like swing her mouse around. Then having this door hinge on the left side is actually optimal. It's literally just a couple of Phillips screws. We'll slide it into position from the other side, kind of like this, and tighten it down. And that's that. Your door now hinges from the left side. I think that's pretty freaking cool. And perhaps even cooler, Antec didn't have to deviate from the standard mid-tower dimensions. This case looks very similar to most mid-towers on the market, and I think that's a great thing because mid-towers are just such a great use of space. They're not too big, so there's not a lot of empty space inside. They don't take up too much real estate on your desk. They're just it's the Goldilocks zone. For me personally, I think for a lot of others as well. It's why they're very popular. But this case has just a few other creature comforts I want to mention before we start building. A 5¼ drive bay. I mean, come on, what decade are we living in? Okay, In all seriousness, I think it's cool that it's there because there are folks that still use optical drives, or I should say CD drives and the like, Blu-ray drives. And so, if you want to populate it, you can. And it's not really compromising anything else in this build because you still get room for a 360mm AIO up front. You can mount hard drives and everything else in the back, on the sides here, and underneath. It's not, it's not hurting anything else by being there. So why not? That's what Antec asked themselves, and that's why it's here. So many airflow directions that you should take advantage of in the P10 Flux. I do want to mention that there are some other Flux cases as well from Antec that you might want to check out. They all pretty much use the same internal layout, but if you're interested in a different external design, so maybe just an aesthetic play, you want to go with a different Flux case, you can do that, and you'll be able to find those by navigating through the top link in this video's description. Now I think it's time to build in this thing. I've got a Z690 platform lined up for us, and then we're going to run a few temperature tests after the fact just to kind of get an idea of the different airflow configurations here. Obviously, the biggest one's going to be the front panel open versus closed. That's what I'm very curious about. I also want to try blocking off the bottom of this right panel here to see if that makes a difference for graphics card temperatures under load as well. So to kick things off, it is Z690 or bust. This one here is from Gigabyte. I'll have it linked below. It is a beautiful motherboard. Of course, uses the latest DDR5 as well as the Intel 12th gen platform. So we're going with a 12900K in this case. Ain't she a beauty? Runs a bit hot, but still a beauty nonetheless. Speaking of running hot, our cooler is going to matter quite a bit in this one, not because I'm, all that worried about the case itself. The P10 Flux should be fine when it comes to thermals, especially with that front panel open, but I want to use an air cooler because it's going to make our test easier to run. If we're using an AIO, we have to wait for that liquid in the loop to thermally equalize over and over again. So this will cut down on time massively, although it's not the best for a 12900K, which is pretty much top of the line from Intel in the desktop space. It is a good looking cooler. It'll actually match our Gigabyte board quite well, and it's still decent. It's just not ideal for this platform. No, we'll roll with it. Of course, we have to go with the best DDR5 around, that being Corsair Dom Platts. Did you think I was going to say anything else? Get yourself checked out, my friend. For storage, I'm just going to go with this drive that says Intel on it. I don't know, seems fitting, I guess. This here will be our graphics card. I think it speaks for itself. And for storage, a Be Quiet Straight Power 11. This thing has some pretty sweet custom cables from CableMod in it as well. So orange and black, not that it really matters because our left side panel is not made of tempered glass. To get started, we're going to install our CPU, memory, and our storage device, which is going to be in this top M.2 slot here. This socket always kind of confuses me because it opens up backwards. Anyway, we're going to drop our 12900K in nice and gently here. And yeah, I always do that. Whoops. All right, here we go. Tighten that back down. Get our DDR4 installed. It's going to be slots 2 and 4 here. Did I get this backwards? Yep, I got it backwards. I'm almost as bad with DDR4 and 5 as I am with the USB Type A ports. I can never get the right orientation the first time around. We'll remove this metal cover here so we can get our M.2 installed. This orientation. Easy as that. I love this because there are no wires involved. And we'll tighten things back down. Oof. I just realized the Mugen 5 doesn't support LJ1700. So we're switching to something else. Aha! Why didn't I realize this sooner? Be Quiet Dark Rock 4, this will do it. I do have a conversion kit for LJ1700 as well, so that's great. We'll get everything situated here, including thermal paste. Gonna go with the X pattern for this larger IHS and the 12900K. Few dots, just make sure that we're all good to go. We're gonna pull the plastic off the cold plate, and the cooler will just sit right here in the middle. Whoo-wee, good looking. Couple screws to fasten it down. Things are looking a bit tight here. You see we're already bending this inside module, which is why I wanted to go with the Mugen 5 to begin with, but no worries. We'll just move this fan to the opposite side of the tower, and we'll have it more or less exhaust heat instead of pull fresh air through. Should be the same effect, although it's not what I would normally recommend. So here is the platform. I think it looks pretty sweet. Now let's get it in the Antec P10 Flux. I'm doing this standing up for the sake of the video, but I highly recommend you lay your case down when installing your motherboard. Especially a heavy one like this beefy CPU cooler on it. Okay, something like that right there. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna try to one-hand this. I'm already regretting it. This is the last of them, and we can check it out so far. Oh yeah, looking pretty clean. I know this looks weird, but it'll be okay. Remember, we'll have an extra 120 mil fan here pulling in air from the basement. Once we get our graphics card in and the cables in here, I think it's gonna look very nicely filled out. We'll even throw in a 5¼ inch drive because why not? I never get the chance to do that anymore. And now that simple wiring is taken care of, we can move on to this install right here, the power supply. We've got our modular cables connected, just a 24-pin, 8-pin EPS, two 8-pin supplemental PCI powers, as well as a SATA power, just daisy chain set connected here. That's all we're gonna need for this build. Slides in from the right side. We'll go fan side down here, although we could go fan side up as well because the top of the basement is perforated, but we do have dust filtration at the base of this case under the PSU, so we'll take advantage of that. Get this lined up pretty much right here. Tighten it down with the included screws, and we'll get to work on cable management. The P10 FLUX has plenty of space behind the motherboard tray, well over ½ inch here, so I wouldn't hesitate to even add cable extensions to non-modular power supplies here if you wanted. Shouldn't be a problem at all. There is a dedicated fan hub button up here that links to the fan controller that you'll get with the P10 FLUX. You can connect up to 6 fans here. Of course, we'll connect 5 because that's about, well, we actually could connect 6 if we wanted. We'll have an extra slot on top of the basement, but we only get one of those intake fans for the basement, so we'll mount that and then we'll run it into here. This will keep things nice and clean as well, have all of our cables terminate into this hub, and then it'll be powered by a simple SATA power cable.
A few moments later.
And I think it looks quite nice. There are many different zip tie points, which always helps with cable management in any case. And we just got the extra 2 8-pins to connect when we get our graphics card in here. That's about it. By the way, not sure if I mentioned it already, but we have this 5th fan already locked down. You'll get extra screws that allow you to thread these all the way through into the basement from the top, so easy installation. Last up here is our 3080 Ti, and woo-wee, ain't she a beauty. We'll slaughter in, and what I really like about this particular 3080 Ti is that it doesn't come with 3 8-pins, so you don't have, I mean, if you think about it, right, 3 8-pins is 24. As a 24-pin, it looks just like your 24-pin for your motherboard. So I don't know, it's just too many cables running around. So 2 8s keeps it nice and clean. We'll get this tightened down at the rear and connect those 2 PCI power cables. And would you look at that? Such a clean looking setup. I'll try to get these cable combs just right. I like that these are bridged, so it keeps things nice and straight for us. I'm just worried about this cable snagging a tad on this card because of how they're bent. This is actually nylon, and it's a bit more stubborn than paracord, so we've got to finesse things a bit. But otherwise, looking really fresh. Oh, I almost forgot one more thing. Our Blu-ray drive. This thing should just slide in to this top section here. Actually, I need to get at it from the inside. Anyway, pretty easy install, but I don't think I'm gonna wire it up because I'm not gonna use it. So I'll just show that you can put one in here, I guess, just to appease those who care. I feel like I'm building a PC from the early 2000s, but at the same time, one from like the 2020s. I don't know. It's a cool blend, but it's just, yeah, these aren't my cup of tea anymore. But I'll tighten things in just to make it feel a bit more legit. And here we are. I think this looks really good. You can see just a subtle bit of orange down here in the power supply. It's just the Be Quiet logo. And of course that's matching with the subtle orange in the custom sleeve cables. Everything else is either a dark gray or a black, and I think it really works here. Now there's still a couple more things I want to do in this video. Obviously we're going to run our plethora of temperature tests with different configurations. In this case, front panel open versus closed. The fan here on versus off. We'll also seal the right side vent area for a couple passes just to see how that affects CPU and GPU temperatures. But I also want to take a few sound measurements as well to see if we can get this case quieter by closing it off completely. We just gotta make sure this thing turns on first. If it doesn't do that, then we've got bigger problems on our hands.
Day 2.
Powering on here. Let's see what we get. It's so cool. You can actually feel this fan working here to provide extra air for that graphics card. Pretty sweet. Hey, there we go. And I think we should boot straight into Windows. This M.2, the reason I used it, it's labeled Intel, is just because that's the drive I usually use for Intel platforms, so I don't have to keep reinstalling Windows over and over. I think we'll enable XMP, and then we'll try to boot into it. We just got thrown into the BIOS for some reason. All right, and here we are in Windows. I have IDA64 Engineer loaded up. We'll use this to map temperatures as well as sustain those loads for both the CPU and the GPU. The top 4 CPU cores are gonna be mapped here in this case. Right, so first set of tests. We're gonna close this front panel here. We've got our left panel on, right panel on. Nothing else is artificially sealed, and we've got the standard fan curve set here based on the top of the case and the fan hub that's in the back, so we can control it with this little top button. So I've got it set to standard. I don't want to quiet things. I want optimal temperatures. After about 20 minutes of letting that run, we'll record peak temperatures across all 4 CPU cores that are being measured, as well as the GPU, and then I'll take my sound meter and we'll measure sound as well, and we'll see how that varies between different configurations. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm going to try to break this down as much as I can in a 1 or 2 minute segment. Firstly, we have our control. That's with the left side panel on, the front panel closed, all fans on, and the system under a sustained IDA64 engineer load, testing the CPU, FPU cache, and the GPU. Temperatures were quite high. I did have to do a bit of tweaking in the BIOS to get our 12900K temps in check. This Be Quiet cooler is right on the edge of what I deem acceptable for an overpowered Core i9 like this, but we were able to stabilize things, and so we're going to be referencing these temperatures for the other test we run through after this. And the very next test was simply opening the front panel. This allows much more air to be pulled in through the 3 front fans, and this clearly lowered temperatures across the board. In fact, all of our CPU core temps were down by maybe 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. That's a pretty significant drop. So if you are more interested in keeping your components cool, then yes, opening the front panel is obviously beneficial. However, we did notice a small bump in sound. Of course, opening that front panel means that sound's going to escape through the front, and even though we tested from the side of the case with the left panel on, of course, there was still a noticeable difference in sound. It was a bit louder with that front panel open. So if you can handle a bit more noise, yes, this case can run very, very cool components. The next test we pursued involved this fan right here under the graphics card. So obviously you get this fan with the case, which I think is awesome. I think Antec is just really being generous here with the fans, which is great. I can't complain. But what I wanted to know is how big of a difference this single 120mm inverted fan made. So again, we have our control. I want you to see here with the front panel closed, all fans on, but then this test is with the bottom fan, the one that's blowing into the graphics card, disconnected. Now, the temperature difference is very, very slight. Some would chalk this up to the margin of error, 1 degree Celsius, 77 to 78 C. But what I think is really important here is where the air is coming from, because in this case, remember again, you have ventilation on the right side. So there is the possibility for air to be pulled in through the power supply basement area into the card. However, this area is filtered down here, and as a result, where I think most of the air is coming from is through the PCI slot covers. You'll find that in most cases that have sealed off or relatively sealed off front panels, the graphics card will still remain relatively cool because there's a lot of open space back here for air to move in. Now, the consequence is that this area is not it doesn't have dust filters. So your system will likely become dirtier over time because, again, the air is not being filtered through PCI slot covers. However, by utilizing this fan, turning it on, and allowing air to be pulled in from the right side, you're now getting filtered air. So if you had this front panel closed and you were worried at all about graphics card temperatures, this fan should take some of that load off, because what it's doing is forcing more of the air that goes into the shroud to come from the right side, which again is filtered, which I think personally will keep your system cleaner in the long run. I obviously can't test that. I'd have to wait several months, but I think that it makes sense to include it if you're on the edge about whether or not it's even viable. I think the bigger impact this has is not necessarily temperatures, but cleanliness in the long run. So the Antec P10 FLUX then is unique in that it's versatile and allows the owner to choose. That word is super important here. The choice of whether or not you want a case that has high airflow properties or that is silent or near silent. You saw there was a pretty substantial difference there. Just by opening and closing the front panel with the sound damping material all around, it does make a difference. That and the fact that you get, again, 5 fans included with this mid-tower. I think this is the most fans I've ever seen a mid-tower include, like out of the box. You don't have to spend any extra. You even get a unique inverted blade fan here at the bottom for, again, that unique airflow for the graphics card. It does help to an extent with temperatures. It's not substantial. You wouldn't necessarily miss it from a temperature perspective, but it does, I think, change the game in terms of where the air is coming from. In this case, it allows it to be more filtered because it can pull it from the right side where there is an integrated dust filter. Your CPU temps are obviously going to benefit greatly from having an open front panel. And look, that's again the whole point of this. If you want that, you just open the door. It's that simple, and then your temperatures will drop pretty substantially. But if that's not as important to you, or maybe you're running a system that just doesn't have a very toasty CPU running at all times, right? Just close the panel, and you may not even realize that your system is on. And that's why I think you should consider the Antec P10 FLUX for your next build. The reason why we agreed to do this video is because I looked at the specs of this thing and I thought, wow, this is something a little different. It's a more modern take on a conventional mid-tower chassis. And I think Antec did a really, really good job here. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, give this one a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Thank you very much, and I will catch you in the next one. By the way, where to find the Antec P10 FLUX, linked in the video description. You can find some other stuff in that link as well. So give them some support. Thanks again for watching this far into the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.